Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Online Smicha. Shlomo HaMelech has taught us Davar Be'itay Ma'atoiv, and our Rebbes teach us Medav Leb Mitetzait. And if it's in the summer months, people spend more time outside. We have to brush up our knowledge with Inyanim, halachas, particularly in halachas that pertain matters that we deal with the outside. So a lot of people like spending time outside in the garden, grass, flowers, and we've shared some halachas that, particularly on the Hilchos Shabbos with grass and flowers. There is another interesting halacha that perhaps is not so famous, and maybe we should talk about. That's mentioned in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Lamed Vav, Seif Yud Beis. And there are two types of flower pots. You learn in Gemara, you learn in Shulchan Aruch. One is called a Otzitz Nakov, and one is called a Otzitz She'enei Nakov. A Otzitz Nakov, they're both pots, flower pots, that where you put the flowers to grow. One has a hole in the bottom so it gets its nourishment, its sustenance through the ground. It's basically a pot that you leave it on the ground and it's still connected. It's mechubar lekarka. There's still a hole that it's still connected to the ground. That's called a otzitz nakuv. And then there is a more common, perhaps, flower pot, which is an otzitz she'enei nakuv, which is more movable, just one that you move around from place to place. So there are, again, a otzitz nakuv, one that has a hole, that's more permanent, stays in one location. And then there is a flower pot, which is a otzitz she'enei nakuv. The types of flower pots that there may be, there could be a wooden one, there could be a clay one, and there could be a plastic one or a metal one or whatever one. Those are the inyanim you have to remember when you're dealing with Hilchos Shabbos with the halacha I'm going to mention. Basically, the question will be, you have one of those in your home, on your porch, on Shabbos. It fell over. The question is, could you pick it up? Could you pick it up from the ground, put it on the table? Could you move it around? What is the halacha of this flower pot on Shabbos to move it around, to pick it up, etc.? So dependent if it's a otzitz nakov versus a otzitz she'enei nakov, and dependent if it's what the otzitz is made from, will decide what the halacha is. And the reason is, basically, when it's a otzitz nakov, when there's a hole in the bottom of the otzitz, that shows that the flower pot, the flower, the things that are in the pot are still mechubar to the karka. So when you are picking it up to move it away, you're being over, you're transgressing the isser of kaitzer, of cutting. You're cutting away its sustenance, it's being mechubar to the karka, and you're ripping it away from the ground. You're taking it away from the ground. So much so, it could be that even if it doesn't look like there is a hole, it could be that chayis to the flower or whatever is growing in that pot could even go through a crack in a board or a crack or even some forms of kalim that are holding those flowers or whatever is growing in that pot could still serve as something which the chayis, the life, the sustenance could go through it, and by moving it around, you're cutting that, and you'll be over kaitzer. Primarily, the halacha here in Siman Shin Lamed Vav primarily talks about the isser of kaitzer. Well, eventually, you'll have to know, on top of that, there is not going to be too many discussion, and eventually they're going to say whether or not kaitzer will apply. Most probably muktzah will anyways apply. So Siman Shin Lamed Vav, Seif Yud Beis, discusses primarily kaitzer. when by moving a flower pot that's close enough to the ground. Now, when the flower pot is on a table already or a windowsill, so obviously there is no sustenance, there is no connection, there is no life coming from soil. If there is no life coming from soil by moving around, there is for sure no shaila of kaitzer. If anything, there might be a shaila of muktzah. Okay, and muktzah will be discussed. But today we're going to focus when there is a shaila of kaitzer. So the Alter Rebbe in Siman Shin Lamed Vav Sif Yud Beis says like this: Hatoyleish me'atzitz nakuv. If you're ripping away from a atzitz nakuv, so a atzitz nakuv is the pot that has a hole in the bottom. Because it has the hole in the bottom, you should know the sustenance, the life of what's growing in this pot is as if it's growing from the ground. So you are over chayiv a isur min haTorah because it's mechubar the karka. It gets its life from the karka. Even if there is some board that it might be laying on, it might be sitting not directly on the ground. There is a board that the pot is on. Guess what? There is holes that are in between the cracks in the board, and the flower pot, being that it has holes, it's made for that. The flower pot and the things that are growing in it has its chayis from the karka. So moving it around, you're disconnecting its chayis. If, however, it was not mechubar, it didn't have its hole that way, then the Alter Rebbe goes on and says that it depends. It depends if it was made out of cheres. Depends, different shittas. It depends. Avo b'she'enei nakuv, the end of the sif. The Alter Rebbe says if the pot does not have a hole, mutter, it would be permitted to move around. You're not disconnecting it, but it depends according to what shitta. B'mad dvarim amurim b'shel eitz. This is only if it's a wooden keli. Avo shel cheres, if that keli is made out of clay, even if there is no hole, according to one opinion, hu kenakuv, it's as if there is a hole. Why? She'ein hacheres oimed b'fnei hasharashim, because the clay keli does not block the roots that are growing from under that keli. Of course, if it's not if it's on the table. If this keli is on the ground and you have a nice flower dish on the ground, then if the keli is made out of clay, even though you think it's separating it from the ground, guess what? The sharashim, the roots that are under and between, there's a kli cheres that's not separating it. There is life going through. Kli cheres is not separating it, and by you moving it around, you're disconnecting it. Avo shel eitz, if it's a wooden keli, then it separates it. It just ve'enei oimed b'fnei hasharashim. However, the other opinion says no. There is no difference. On the other way around, cheres, yeah, wood, no. So the Alter Rebbe says there's a big machlokes. V'yesh lachush lebeis asvaris. Therefore, I have no choice. I have to be worried about both opinions. Kli she'enei nakuv. Keli, the flower pot, even if it doesn't have holes, whether it's a kli cheres or a kli eitz, ulizar bein b'shel eitz, bein b'shel cheres, even if it doesn't have holes, at least mid the rabbanon, you should not move around. So the ma'aser, like, happens like this: if it's a kli that's nakuv, which I think is not that common, if it's on the ground, you're not allowed to move around if it tips over or whatever, because then it's a dairaisa. If it's not nakuv, then it's a issa d'rabbanan, and the Alter Rebbe says issa d'rabbanan bein b'shel cheres, bein b'shel bein b'shel eitz. So what happens if it's plastic? Or what happens if it's metal? So they bring from the, it depends, from the Mishnah Berurah, based on what the Biur Halacha says in the Mishnah Berurah, it depends what the reason is for this svara to be machmir. If the svara to be machmir is because it's a chash, a gzeira, to, if a cheres could cause suction through the thing, so the other things which don't cause suction, maybe you don't have to be machmir. Or maybe there's other reasons. We just have to be machmir all the way through. The Maisa, the bottom line is, this is all a shaila only in cases of the discussion, as I said, because of kaitzer. We anyways have a shaila. Mitzad muktzah, the Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasa Chelik Aleph Perik Chav Zayin Sif Bey says mitzad muktzah you can't move a flower pot anyways. And another thing is, you should know that if it's on a stone floor, if a flower pot is on a stone floor, many poskim can hold that a flower pot that's on a stone floor is not mafsik, and you're not allowed to move a flower pot that's sitting on a stone floor because it draws through the stone, and believe it or not, it's considered mechubal karka.